Today, I want to share my insight in developing a tiny house community in the state of Florida. To do so, I want to take you on a journey on my inspiration point, a property that I've known for an extensive period of time. I've had a lot of time to think about what's possible in creating a tiny house community for this home site. But to do so, we're going to look at that as an inspiration point, and then I'm going to take you to Florida to find out what's possible in finding property in the state of Florida to develop a tiny house community. I'm going to do all that right after this message. Well, welcome back. My name is Troy Funk, and that's Funk, F-U-N-K, Funk, and I am a real estate broker in the state of Florida, and I've been in the business going on almost 4 decades now, and I've seen a lot of change to Florida. But the one thing that's absolutely well known right now is that we are in a crisis. We're in an affordability crisis. We don't have enough affordable housing. As such, tiny homes have become the new buzzword. A lot of people are looking for the idea of how do you find affordable housing? And tiny home communities certainly have a lot of attention as people are looking to purchase and buy a property into a tiny home community, or in some cases actually create the whole community themselves. I want to take you on my journey so far on what's possible. I'm going to take you to Mountain Rest, South Carolina. This is the location of a property that I think is an absolutely ideal tiny house community. Property that's been in my family for over 20 years. My father and stepmother purchased a property with the idea of it becoming a family compound. And when they did that, they divided the property up so my grandmother could build her home, and my great aunt could also build a home adjacent to her. And the two sisters lived together for many years until eventually they passed on. So this property was divided, and it left a 1-acre parcel. Now that has remained in the family, and it's had a lot of ideas of what can we do with that property, right? Well, my father had the idea of turning it into an RV resort, having RVs there, and he put power to the property, and then later on had the idea of turning it into a Christmas tree farm. And as such, that property is absolutely beautiful now as the trees have grown up, and it's become an ideal spot. Now, what's really special about this property is it's flat. It's in the mountains, but it's a flat piece of property, and it was developed for that. And it's an ideal site, but what makes it really special is its location. Now, the property is on a state road that's about a mile to Oconee State Park. And Oconee State Park is an absolutely beautiful state park. Now, this park sits at the foothills to what leads up to Highlands, North Carolina. So there's a lot of demand for vacation rentals, so to speak, in that area. Now, the park has they have cabins that they rent out that are booked out. So it's hard to get even a cabin in there at this point. So for me, there's an idea of vacation rentals, tiny house vacation rentals on this home site because the demand of what's adjacent to it, Oconee State Park. Now, again, Oconee State Park is a beautiful community. There's a lot of activity there, and it's attracting a lot of people. Now, the affordability is much greater because it's again in foothills, or it's pretty much at the base of Highlands. Now, Highlands, of course, is a beautiful upscale high-end area, and cost of vacation rentals is about 3 times. So this site seems absolutely ideal to me for a tiny house community that could be turned into a vacational rental site as well. So what also makes this site good is the fact that the restrictions are real light. You can do a lot of things on this property without government restrictions, or the government restrictions are certainly very light. There is access right now to utilities on the site, and this could be an absolutely ideal spot for a tiny home. But here's the problem. It's in South Carolina. Now, I live in Florida, and feasibility for me right now is it's not ideal to create this tiny home at this point, but it's something that I have in my heart because, of course, the property has a lot of sentimental value to me, and the idea that it could stay in the family and become a resource for generational wealth is certainly pretty exciting. So the idea of turning this into a tiny home community has a lot of appeal to me. Okay, so let's go back to Florida and talk about what's possible in Florida for a tiny home community, because that's where I live, and ideally that would probably be where I'd want to start my first tiny house community and then eventually create something in South Carolina. There's two challenges when you're looking to develop a tiny house community. The first one, of course, is finding the land, right? Finding the right property. And then the second one is finding the right structure. So let's first talk about land. What's possible for land in Florida? Now, I think a lot of people have this misconception that you can buy a lot and put a tiny house and the math works out and it is perfect. You know, it's affordable and you end up with a good product. I'm not seeing that so much, not in Florida, not anymore anyway, because 1,000 people a day are moving to our state and land has become prime. Land is the new gold in Florida. There's such a rush for land that land has become very expensive. And when you're buying land in Florida, you also have to be careful of what you're buying. I created another video that talks about beware before you buy property in Florida, before you buy land. There's a lot of things that a lot of consumers might not know of if they're moving to Florida, not realizing that they could be buying a property that's unbuildable or that floods or that there's issues of mineral rights or things that they don't foresee in just buying land. So buying land is certainly a challenge in Florida, and you got to do your homework before you buy land. So what is possible as far as buying land? Well, again, the affordability is a challenge. It's hard to find a parcel of land to build a house and make that work out so that it is affordable in the end, because land, for the most part, in my area, you're looking at $250,000 pretty much for a lot. And if you put a home on it, the math isn't gonna work out, not for one structure. But there is possibility. And how do you find that possibility? Well, if you have the resources and you can go big, that makes more sense. Now, I wanna talk about two properties that I have for sale right now that I think are really good candidates for investment or for tiny house as it relates. Now, one is really in a very good location. It's in Sarasota, and this property is 2 acres, but what's unique about it is it has 2 rental units on the property. So a lot of people don't see this opportunity as a tiny home community because they see that it already has 2 investment homes. Now, those 2 investment homes produce rental income. So when you buy this property, you have 2 homes that are producing rental income, and you have a 2 acre envelope to start developing. Now it's already tentatively sectioned off so that you could build about 7 structures, but if you take it to the county, there's certainly possibility to do a lot more with that. So the idea is this is a property that has 2 acres, has 2 rental income units on site. It could potentially be a tiny home community. And price point, you're gonna be looking at north of $1 million for this property. That's actually a pretty good value when you look at the location of this property and the idea of the math. Once you start developing that into housing, what's possible. So that's one parcel. So that's one idea to buy a community in our area. You're looking at north of $1 million. Another possibility is I actually have a horse farm listed that's 11 acres and it's ideal for development. There's development all around there. Now, development for housing. Now, tiny homes, the county is saying no, not yet. We don't want to see tiny homes in this community. But we are having such an affordability crisis of housing. I wouldn't think that might be a forever situation. I think that this property, 11 acres in a prime location in Sarasota, north of $2 million, is a really good investment, especially when you have a horse farm that already produces income from the start. Somebody can park their cash there and have a property that produces income and then later on develop it. Maybe into a tiny house community, maybe not, but it is certainly a good candidate for a property for development. So what else is possible with land and buying land? Well, again, you gotta have an open mind because the affordability of finding a property for one structure, typically from what I'm seeing right now, is just not cost effective, not to build one tiny home. So again, going big is normally the answer. Now, what if you can't do that, right? What else is possible? Well, what we're seeing a lot of happen here are communities where you can have a tiny home be put in the community, or you buy your tiny home and it's in a community, but you don't really own the land, you're leasing the land. And in essence, you're living in a community of other tiny homes. Now, here's the reality of that. This has really basically become the modern day mobile home park, right? This is where you have a tiny home in a community of other tiny homes, but you're paying a lot rent to live in that community. Now, what are the lot rents? Now, I've seen them range greatly. Now, like in an older community of mobile homes, we're seeing values from, say, $400 to $1,000. Now, in more of an upscale tiny home community, you're closer to that $1,000 a month. You're paying that to rent that home site for your tiny house. Now, that does include, in most cases, a clubhouse and facilities, and you're buying a lifestyle into that. But that's a way to end up having a tiny home without actually buying the property, that you would pay your lot rent. So that's one possibility. In closing, I hope I've been helpful to you on sharing my journey into discovering what's possible to develop a tiny house community in the state of Florida. Now, there is such a huge demand and need for affordable housing. The idea of a tiny house community is certainly well received. And as such, this could be a great opportunity for real estate investors. If you're looking to buy property in the state of Florida, please contact me, and my information's below. And if I've been helpful to you, certainly hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you on the next video.